Well, hello, and it's good to have you on the other side of the camera. So hopefully, we'll be able to share a slice of our life with you and have that experience to pass on. Hopefully, some things that I wish I would have known. Uh, the relationship with Janet and I started basically meeting at church, and it was one of those things where we had a lot of singles in the congregation, and there was a lot of sisters for me to date. And Janet had just arrived back from the mission field. She was in Buenos Aires, and it was very fortunate that we had met at the first time that she had come back, and thought, oh, here's a new sister to date. So, let's get to know her. And so I had arranged this really romantic date, and it was for a first date. And at the time, I was living with a married couple. This was in Wilton Manors in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And we had this date, and we picked her up in Miami at the time. But we were going down to the Keys, so we drove from Fort Lauderdale to Miami to the Keys. Well, the Italian Fisherman was one of these wonderful places that you could go and have a great meal and just spend the whole evening by the bay and all that. So as Janet and I were walking on this deck, we had a conversation, and the conversation didn't go too well. I thought I was being encouraging to Janet, where she thought I was being arrogant, and it was kind of a whole misunderstanding. So the car ride back to Fort Lauderdale, let's just say this was in a VW Golf, and the back seat was not very large, but I was trying to sit as far away from her as possible in the back seat until we could just drop her off. And I think, oh gee, this is not gonna ever happen again. I'm never gonna take this person out again. I don't know why I did this. I was so surprised at the outcome of the date. And months went by, and we had an opportunity to where we would double date. At the time, we always would double date. And I saw her with a friend of mine, and I thought, hey, she's not so bad. I think we need to do this again. So we went to Little Havana, we had some coffees, and we were drinking that. It was late at night. And we, of course, we had church in the morning. It was a Saturday night. And we got back to Miami for Janet, and then Fort Lauderdale for us. Well, to make a short story long, we wound up dating, and we got engaged, and we went steady and then got engaged. But it was one of those things where your relationship was very much mentored by whoever was spiritually kind of giving you advice and leadership that way. So it wasn't very smooth, let's say, in the sense that it's not like, okay, we met each other, we liked each other, and we decided we were going to get married. There was a lot of, it was kind of like working for the government. There was a lot of not paperwork, but there was a lot of approvals that were needed. Yeah, so there were steps involved. But I'm glad, and it was great to know that our honeymoon night was really our honeymoon night, and it was purity in our relationship. And I always look back at that and think about the dates that we went on. But I'd say the biggest thing, and here I am talking a lot, and I'm going to let Janet comment on this after, but the biggest thing in relationships is the friendship. Because once you get to be the age that we're at, if you don't have the friendship, a lot of the things that generally people in the world would be so attracted to, whether it's their looks or, whatever the case might be, those things have kind of I don't want to say vanished, but let's say maybe diminished somewhat. So, but what you do have is you have that friendship, and you have that core part of your relationship. So really we learn to become friends first before any kind of aspect of any physical aspect of the relationship took place, which was totally opposite for me before I became a Christian, because it was always about, the whole, sexual experience and what was to take place, after the date, so to speak. But the whole focus was really a lot on just the relationship and building that. And Janet was really great to be able to get to know, and we did a lot of nice things, writing cards, and did a lot of fun things to get to know each other in a friendship way. But I'd say that would be my big advice as far as dating relationships and what you're looking for, and kind of like the end result, and having that foundation built on friendship. But how could you elaborate on that, Janet?
Well, gosh, I was going to go back a little bit further with our beginnings and how we became Christians, but Steve and I were from very different backgrounds to begin with. I grew up in Jamaica, and my heritage is Lebanese, and Steve, of course, is from a Jewish background. And so while there are some similarities, being brought up in a third world country is pretty different. And so I had left the United States. I did not think I was ever going to come back. I probably had the most incredible time of my life while I lived in Argentina, and then was asked to come back to help start a bilingual work in Miami. And it was very hard readjusting here. When we first went out on that date, I was kind of like, okay, this is definitely not the one. I figured God was bringing me back here probably to find a husband. I'd been pretty seriously dating a brother in the church in Fort Lauderdale before, and for various reasons it hadn't worked out. But even before becoming a Christian, I'd been engaged a couple of times, and I had a real problem with commitment. I just could not be loyal to anybody, really. And that was what was so difficult for me to become a Christian, because I knew you don't mess with God by then. I'd figured that much out, and I was like, if I make this is for life. And what if I can't be faithful to God? So I took a really long time, and it wasn't until I committed to God and had remained faithful to Him for 10 years, and then met Steve, that I realized when we got to that portion of our relationship that, yeah, I can be faithful now, because God's taught me about faithfulness and what real love is. And I would say that was the fundamental thing. I had started seeing the other brother that I had been dating before I left for Argentina. And it was kind of a joke in the congregation at the time, because I remember going up to a brother who was in the full-time ministry when Steve asked me to go steady. And I said, hey bro, I'm going steady. And he goes, which one? And it was, it really, I was like, whoa. But it was really true. And it just taught me a lot about God, and the way that in the church He can work through all kinds of very awkward and difficult situations for the good of all those who love Him. Yeah. And the other brother was actually the one who gave us a gift of all the music to our wedding.
Oh wow.
He didn't attend, but he wished us the best, and that was really special. And just the support that we received from the congregation was amazing at that time. We went through a lot of potholes. Steve will talk about paperwork, but I call these, we had some big potholes in Jamaica in the roads, and we definitely had that throughout the entire time that I was part of what was the International Churches of Christ at the time. So Steve has a hard time keeping secrets, right?
Me?
So he kind
I've
of
gotten
was
better, but
hinting.
yeah, I have had.
He was hinting about us looking for a ring, and he had this one ring, and he kept talking about the diamond is one day going to be made into an engagement ring, and he said it enough times in a very pointed way that I figured out, well, maybe I should make my preferences known at this point. And I said, actually, I've never been much of a diamond person. I truly love emeralds. And so it was like, whoa. So it was like, okay, let's go out looking for a ring that you would like. So we went out and we did that, and I found this one that I still love and I'm still very excited about. And he mentioned that to his discipler, who was a zone leader at the time. And he thought that that was tremendously unsubmissive of me, and therefore I was not ready to be married. And so he finally gave Steve the okay to ask me to marry him, but he would not let us set a wedding date, which was very weird in the church, because usually as soon as a couple got engaged, they pretty much set a wedding date, within a couple of months, like 4 months, 5 months, whatever it was. So anyway, we ended up getting another minister and his wife involved to help disciple this other couple, disciple us, and it all worked out. And
They were all good friends.
Yeah, yeah. But there was a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? Misunderstanding.
Yeah.
Of leadership in the church at the time. It was pretty authoritarian. And anyway, it all worked out for the best, but I saw God working in this situation. And by the time we got the go-ahead, yes, to set a date, the only date on a weekend, on a Saturday that was available was 6 weeks away from that day. And so either that, if we wanted a spring wedding, or wait till do it in the summer, which I hated the heat of summer. So, and I know you had a very chilly wedding yourself, but so I said, yeah, I can pull it off in 6 weeks. So anyway, we did, and it was beautiful, and I'm very grateful to all those that were involved. But we even talked about children when we went through premarital counseling and everything, and we had both decided that we were not going to have children, that the world was very messed up, and we didn't necessarily feel we could love other people's children. But when I was younger, I had been to an orphanage in Jamaica, and at the time had said, if I ever get married and have kids, I'd like to have one and adopt one, but a foreign adoption, because those kids have no hope. I mean, it's really sad. There is no future for them. And so we weren't going to have kids. That was great. However, a year after we got married, my mom died suddenly. And I'm an only child, and my father had died many years before. So I suddenly realized, wow, I'm the last one. It dies with me. And that changed my whole attitude. And so I was 36 at that time. I got married when I was 35. I'm 2.5 years older than Steve. He says I robbed the cradle. So anyway, I talked to him about adoption, and he wasn't really into it at the time, and so that was fine. And I just kept praying about it and praying about it. And we were trying to get pregnant, and I hadn't gotten pregnant after 6 months, which was not really, a long time trying. But because of my age, we went in and did some testing, and they said everything was fine, just relax and go with the flow. And so he decided, I've been thinking about it, and I think I'd really like to go ahead and adopt. And I said, well, why don't we stop trying and just adopt too? And he said, no, let's keep trying. Well, it turns out we contacted an agency that did foreign adoptions, and we were going to the classes, had the home study, all the things that you go through to prep for that. And we were down in Miami for one of the classes one night with a bunch of other families who were adopting. And afterwards, the director of the agency asked if we would stay behind, and she asked us to come into her office and showed us a picture of this beautiful little baby from Guatemala and said, would you like to adopt her? And we were like, yeah. Well, God has an incredible sense of humor and sense of timing. We saw the picture of the baby, and I conceived that night. So we were not just expecting one, but two simultaneously. And I think that is one of the areas that God just showed himself so incredibly faithful to a girl who was 14 years old in Jamaica and had said, if I ever have children, I want to have one and adopt one. Mm-hmm. And he honored that wish, that prayer. And the whole adoption process, even the birth process, both our girls were real miracles. Melanie, our biological daughter, was born 3 weeks early, and the cord was wrapped around her neck a couple of times when she was delivered. Had she gone to term, she would probably have been stillborn. So God showed his hand in that. We had her for 10 months before we were actually able to bring our other daughter, our adopted daughter, Emily, home. There were a lot of problems down in Guatemala at the time. There are rumors that they spread sometimes that Americans go down there to adopt children, steal their kids, and harvest their organs in the US for other people. So it was a very sticky situation at the time. And because I spoke Spanish and I'm dark-haired, the director felt I could go down there and pass for Hispanic, because the US Department of State was recommending that Americans not travel to Guatemala because of adoption, to adopt. Anyway, it worked out great, but there were a lot of things. Satan was he was putting up roadblocks to our marriage, to our becoming Christians, to everything. There were roadblocks that through prayer and God's presence, his being right there, we could see it. The hotel that we were supposed to meet the doctor who was bringing Emily to me was full for I don't know what happened. I can't even remember, but we couldn't get into that hotel. Something went wrong with the reservations, so we had to take the cab to another hotel, and cell phones didn't exist back then, so it was kind of like, well, maybe they did exist, we just didn't have any. They weren't that common. And I was like, what's going to happen? So I called home from the hotel and I said, have everybody pray. And we had a contact number for this one woman who maybe could get the message to the doctor, because the time was approaching for him to bring the baby to meet me. And, well, she was 21 months old at the time. Anyway, God worked it out. And somehow the doctor went to the hotel, called this lady and said, they're not here. And she said, it's amazing, they just called and they're at this hotel. It was so God. It was just so God with both our girls that he meant them for us, and he was honoring that desire of our heart. So met Emily, brought her back to the States. It was a major adjustment going from 0 to 2, especially when they're at different stages developmentally, because you got to protect one from the other, you know. But again, just the church was amazing in our life, because we didn't have the familial support in terms of our parents. You know, there were no grandparents really there. Steve's parents were alive, but they lived quite a distance away. But yeah, it was pretty amazing. And having been an only child, it was really important to me that children have someone else other than just the parents. So, and God's honor that, because the girls growing up, you know, they had their fights like you probably did with your brother and sister, but they, as adults, have become very, very close. So that was one of the huge stones, our marriage, our children, you know, and then all the moves in our life. I was able to stay home with the girls till they went to kinder. And it was like, you know, I cried with Emmy when she went off to kinder. And then by the time Melanie's time rolled around, I was just like, God, that is great. You know, I'm free. I can go out. I can work. I can do whatever. I love staying home with them, but I really missed the productivity. And so, I forgot the point I was going to make right there. Oh, no, everything was great. I got a job teaching English to speakers of other languages at one of the community colleges down there. Loved it. It was around the corner from the place. We bought a fixer-upper. It was awesome. We'd just gotten it to where we liked it. I was having such a great time. And Steve says to me, it's time to move. And I was like, huh? Because for 19 years, I lived in the same house in Jamaica, and when we met, it was like apartment the first year, built our first house, and then, it would seem like we were moving, and I just wasn't really used to that, like I'd never heard of a starter home. You just buy a house and live there. Anyway, so we ended up liquidating after much prayer, because I was dead set against moving. And he wanted us to buy a piece of property in the middle of the state, open a nursery, build mini botanical gardens, and make that our ministry to the area.
Yeah. So it was one of those things, just like you read in Joshua, where the Israelis, well, not the Israelis, but the Israelites, they traveled across the water. As the Ark of the Covenant was there and with the priests, and they walked across. But once everybody finished walking across, the water came. So they couldn't go back. And that's the way it was with us, where once we left, in my mind, I couldn't go back. Mm-hmm. So we were on this incredible mission that was probably the most difficult thing that we've had to do in our entire careers as humans. And here we are with two little kids and living out in the country, not really born in the country and not knowing a lot about country. We both learned how to use a tractor and how to do all kinds of things like fix wells, and learned about septic tanks and all these kind of things that as a city dweller you had no idea what it took to be a country living person. And we did fairly well in our adaptation, but I think it was pretty isolated being out in the country a lot. So our church family in Gainesville, we would commute, and at the time, after we started this business, and I'm kind of getting a little ahead of myself, but the idea was to start this business, what Janet had mentioned, and I was changing my work. Neither one of us had ever been in agriculture and worked in agriculture. And as we were trying to get the business going, we saw a lot of money going out, but not a lot coming in. So we were definitely one of these small businesses that was undercapitalized. And that's the toughest thing for a small business, is to be able to continue working with funds. So we would do all kinds of things. We did anything we could possibly do within the realms of what we're doing. So we started a plant rental business that would take us into cities like Ocala or Gainesville. And Janet would, and myself, mostly Janet, would service the accounts and do these plant rentals. So that was an income. Then we had things that we would do with shows. We would do craft shows, and we would do, that was another aspect, but we would do these shows where we would take all of our plants and hard goods and sell them at craft shows and sell them at garden shows and things. But as Janet was mentioning, we would set up for horse shows, and we would we had one regular thing that we'd do for Pasafinos, and the Pasafino horses, they're like little sewing machines, and they would go across the sounding board, and I don't know how they judge them, but maybe it takes a certain amount of time, or how the timing of how long it takes them. But it was one of these things where it was kind of maybe a Colombian and a South American thing, where a lot of people would come up from South Florida, a lot of Hispanics, and they wanted it to look very festive, and they wanted it to look pretty. So we would take plants and put them in the arena, in the horse arena, and I would stylize the mulch into designs. So you had a very beautiful, a very attractive venue for this competition that they would have. And by the time that we were finished, you'd see all the horse trailers coming in and they're unloading, and sometimes they wouldn't even want to wait. You're still working, and you see this Pasofino going behind you, and it was kind of scary and stuff because we were not horse people per se. We appreciated them, and we lived outside of Ocala, which is like the horse capital of the world, and we appreciated them, but we didn't know that much about them, but we did respect them, and that was just all part of the learning aspect of living in the country. And I thought the kids would be safer living in the country, but it was totally wrong. The kids, they wind up getting hurt and getting pregnant and doing a lot of things because
not our girls. He's just talking.
Right. I'm just saying. And I thought, oh, country kids, they'll be so innocent and pure and this and that. And
they were bored stiff.
And the big excitement was, buying, probably some beer underage, liquor, and going to hang out by the Winn-Dixie. So that was the big thing where you would drive by sometimes on a Saturday night and see all these kids out in the parking lot at Winn-Dixie, and there's nothing good that came out of that. So.
But I think the thing that God was trying to teach me during that time was to be completely reliant on Him. Because financially it was pretty dire. I can remember times when bills were there that were due and we just didn't have the money to pay. And He would send somebody in. We'd need like $850. Steve gave this example not too long ago. And somebody would come in and spend $900 in the store that day. Because we had a gift store, but it was kind of a high-end gift store too. So He was always taking care of the needs, but I felt like I have to work harder. And so, I remember clocking 100 hours one week. And I thought, and I'm not even a doctor making major bucks. This is just not the life that I wanted for our children. And what we realized is, people loved the place. They would come out and they would want to hang out there. And they just thought, oh, this is like a dream. And I'm thinking, your dream, my nightmare, because it was just, I would get up early in the morning and cook for the day so that everybody would have stuff to eat. But I'd be outside working with lights or whatever, trying to plant things or get things
very
ready.
Physical.
It was very physical.
And I think the biggest thing, and to kind of piggyback off of what Janet was saying, was that we learned about the manna principle, that God would give you exactly what you needed and a little bit more. But we trusted Him, and being kind of out there without that support, we learned to be very God reliant. And I think that's another stone, and being part of what I would say is memory stones, as far as how we would memorialize that as one of the biggest things that we got out of that. And I think at one point in my life I was very materialistic, and it taught me about things aren't as important as people are, and that it's not the things that you have, but it's really the love that you have with people and for people. And I think that's really the most important thing, in that things break, and things, this wonderful thing you thought would bring you some happiness just really winds up being a burden sometimes. And I think maybe, I'm not saying that the decision to go into this venture was that kind of a thing, and I didn't think that we're going to make a fortune doing this. It was more like the idea of, we're going to change our lifestyle. And going back to what we were saying before, is that our church family in Gainesville was very supportive, and they would come out and they would visit with us, and they would help us around the place, and it really helped get us through the time. But they were so willing to support us, and to not only emotionally, but financially, by coming out, and they would buy stuff that I don't think they really needed or wanted those things, but I think that they would buy them to say, well, we're going to help these people that have this crazy dream of building this place up. And, we were just a little bit ahead of our times as far as what we did. Now, it's funny because we sold the place to a couple that moved from Minnesota. And it had a commercial aspect to it on US Highway 27. And they wound up turning the place into a pizza place.
Just the half of the first.
Right, so it was zoned commercial. So there's a area where you could sit outside and eat pizza. They have a stone, a fire, wood burning stove, a fire oven or something. Yeah. So, and then they have like a little bar area. So they had made it out of containers, and it's when you first pull in and see there. And I just remember last year, it was when it was a little bit cooler. We went there for the first time after leaving, and you talk about not going back. Well, I was very hesitant to go back because I felt like, in one way, that it was this big dream that we had, and we'd always share with people our vision for the place, and it was our ministry to reach out to people and have the plants and do that. But after leaving, to come back and to see somebody that was so successful doing something else, it was kind of hard to be very happy for them. I was happy for them.
I was thrilled for them.
But I struggled with the fact that here we just put our blood, sweat, and tears into this place and got it working in a certain direction, but just couldn't really get beyond ourselves in so many ways. And they came and had another vision of it, kind of almost like our work and helpfulness set them up to be successful, which in a sense, so in a sense, they were kind of like standing on our shoulders. And to me, that brought me joy because I'd never thought of it that way. And to know that I was helping someone else to be successful through my efforts, I think God worked that out. But He did take us, out of that desert time. So I would consider that a stone in the desert. So that desert was something where we were to learn certain things, and I think we learned to persevere. I think we learned how to trust God, and I think that He kept us together through the whole thing. When really so many times that the glue was coming apart.
The heat.
Because of the hardship. It was truly a lot of hardship and a lot of things. I've almost came off the roof of the place fixing it up. So many things. It's a very dangerous kind of environment. You wouldn't think that the country would be dangerous, but it was.
Oh yeah.
It's very dangerous.
I almost tipped the tractor.
Right, and she got in a wreck. She got in a wreck crossing over the road, and I had to see them in the emergency room. But God, He protected us through the whole thing to bring us finally to Tallahassee. And I had a job where I didn't know how it was going to go, and the kids were still in school. So I took the job. I had to take a job outside of the nursery and was working at UF. And then I took a job from UF, got a job at Florida State. And I've been there for the last 14 years. But the whole change as far as career-wise to Florida State, it changed the trajectory of my career and helped me because they invested in me, and I took a lot of classes and advanced in some certifications that I needed. So really they helped me a lot, and it was really one of these things where if I didn't go through the experience at UF and have worked institutional wise there, I would have never gotten the job at Florida State. But I commuted. I guess the point I was going to make was I commuted every weekend and left Janet there in this very difficult environment as almost like a single mom during the week. And then I would come on the weekend and then have to go back and forth. So I was renting a room from one of the brothers from church up here, and I commuted back and forth on the weekends. And I know it was a real hardship for her. We did it for a whole year. But even through that, God helps me to learn how to have better quiet times. And I would say that would be a big stone for me. Another one is just dedicating myself, because He took everything familiar away from me in a sense where I was in a new town with new people, and I really didn't have any kind of a social life at all. My family was in another city. So I learned how to have quiet times, and I became more disciplined as far as every morning when I wake up that I have this time, or I would, before I would go to bed, I would just dedicate a certain amount of time, praying and reading, and it forced me to be more thoughtful as far as my relationship with God was going. I was in a very pressure kind of new job situation, walking into a suicide situation with a group of people that I was supervising that were just very difficult people. That it was like a suicide mission, I would say. But he got me through the whole thing, even through the way I was treated very poorly by the employees that were there. And two of the employees were, they had actually wanted the job that I had gotten, and here they hired somebody from, the rival school. I didn't tell anybody where I was working, but they all found out, yes. So here I am at UF, and I'm seeing all these, Indian heads all over the place, and it just felt very odd. Because and it's not like I was so vested into the whole Gator Nation, but I did feel a sense that, I was there during Tebow's era, and it was a very special time being in Gainesville during the national championship, and seeing all the players on campus and all that. But I know that, we often do and have ideas of things the way we think they should turn out, but God has He has a whole nother purpose other than what we think. And I think that would be the whole, if you were to put all the stones together, that I would say that would be the overarching theme of saying that God has these plans for us, and we think we know what's best, but really He knows what's best. And He's always guided us and took us through that Jordan River. He helped us across the Jordan River, and He showed us a place that we could take, and that we could conquer, and we could learn to battle through those things and be victorious after going through so many different trials. And I would say that it made us stronger as a couple, wouldn't you say?
Definitely. Yeah, I think adversity definitely strengthens the Christian who relies on the Lord.
Yeah, we say victorious in martyrdom.
But I know that we're probably need to wrap this up, and I just want to say that if the Lord is the center, you cannot fail. And I think going through the Old Testament, you see that with the persecution of the Christians in the New Testament, that it doesn't really matter. It does, but it doesn't. Obviously, it matters when you're going through it. But the things that happen to us here, as Paul said, are light and momentary, and that we just have to keep the focus on the end result and the eternity that we're working towards in the presence of God.
Right.
And hold fast to that no matter what is happening. I mean, no matter what sickness, no matter what pain.
And we keep each other saved.
That's
so we're a support. So we made a decision that when things are difficult, only one of us can be down at a time. So the other one has to encourage and build the other person up. So we can't be that way. And one of the things that really is an encouragement with Janet, as far as her relationship with God, is that she loves God more than she loves me. And I know that if she loves God more than she loves me, then I don't need to be insecure in my relationship, and that she'll be faithful. That she'll be faithful because she's faithful to God. And if she's faithful to God, she's going to be faithful to me. Yeah. So as far as that goes, I can't imagine being married to somebody who doesn't love God the way that she does. She really does have a deep love for God. Yeah. It inspires me.
Well, so your Toastmasters training is coming out beautifully. I had some questions, but you brought everything so full circle, and I'm like, oh, it's like he's already written out his Toastmaster speech, both of you. A couple of takeaways. One, I've learned that if something is not succeeding like you wanted it to, ooh, there goes the cats.
That's one kitty.
Yep, one kitty. Also, Janet and Steve have 2 new kittens, which have been super distracting for me because they're adorable. But if at first you do not succeed, add a pizza business to it.
Yeah, there you go.
There's takeaway number 1. Also, the mental image I have of Janet on a tractor is now my new favorite thing.
And even in the
I
bucket,
love you, Janet.
I've put her up in the bucket and raised her up in the bucket to get
the roof.
pine straw up on the roof.
Oh,
Yeah.
I love you even more now. I just have
I'm
a
sorry.
beautiful image of you, like almost
I
tipping
want you
over.
to know it was a Kubota, okay? And I would
Yeah, it
tell
wasn't John
people,
Deere.
I would tell people, this Kubota tractor is my best friend next to Jesus. I mean,
She said,
literally,
just put a hole in the backyard and just bury me.
Yeah, right there with it.
Right there.
Oh
yeah.
my goodness. And then the other thing that's so cool to me is, yes, we focused in on like the Joshua story as far as God holding back the river and that, story that we've kind of harped on in Joshua 3 and 4. But one of the cool things that I have heard from your story and that I'm hearing over again, and in my ripe 30 young years, I can now even do a little bit of, is saying, I remember these periods of time and what it felt like there and what God taught me there. And then you fast forward to another time. And then you fast forward to another time and what he taught you in all of those places. You mentioned that was our desert season. And maybe this was our, this season. And this is when we were in Egypt. And you can make, I love analogies. You can make all these analogies to like, we were here. This is what he was teaching us. And what you said so beautifully, wrapping it all back together when you talked about like how God is faithful in each of those. And there really is a reason why you were there. Mm-hmm. I read a book one time about loving the neighborhood that you're in and like loving where you're at. And it was really good for me because there's been certain times where you probably thought, I don't want to be here. This isn't where I am. Or when God says, I know you love where you are. I'm going to move you, right? And it's like, to me, he can't show you those moments where he says, I need to bring you to a river that I have to hold back the waters from. If I don't move you there, you'll never be able to see and witness my power and what I want to do in your life. And so it's just cool to me to hear y'all talk about the different phases. And I have tons of questions. We don't have time for it now, but like why in the world you got into to that business? I have so many follow-up questions for Steve now of like why that was interesting. But yeah, is there, one final question, is there anything that y'all would tell somebody who is still young in their faith, who is still young in age, who is like, man, I struggle to know that God is working in my life, or that he's real, like, or that he has a plan. Maybe there's just, struggles of like remembering that God is there and he's active in our life. Any last words of wisdom?
Dig deep.
Yeah.
Dig deep
Yeah.
into the Lord. Taste the goodness of God. Because I think that's what carried us both through everything that we've been through. That if you have a superficial relationship with God, and you're there because of the social aspect of the church, community is extremely important. Jesus knew that. That's why we have the church. But people will always disappoint us, maybe unintentionally at times, but God will always be there for you. And therefore, that is who you've got to really work on the relationship with, and do it earlier than later. I've been reading through 2nd Chronicles, and it's amazing, the kings in there that were faithful and did what was right in the Lord's eyes, but as time wore on, they forgot the Lord. And I'm like, wow, that is such a temptation, as things are going well and you're prospering, to kind of forget. I went to battle with 400,000 against an army of 800,000, and God just gave us the victory.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you start relying on man and yourself. So no, that is definitely, I don't know what you would say.
Well, I'd like to add to what Janet said and say that if you do have an idea to do something and it's a major change where you're kind of hesitant to do it, just to lay out a fleece and to say, Lord, if you are to, if this is the way we should go, you know, make it possible. And a no is as good as a yes. So if God says no, I don't think you should do that. That just say, Lord, make it obvious that I should not do that. You know, whether it's moving to another town or buying a house in a certain place or, you know, whatever the case. I'm talking about the big changes that you would really need to just rely upon God. That you would just test the spirits and see what God has in store for you. And even though He allows you to do something sometimes, it doesn't mean that it's going to be the easiest and best thing to do, because there's always a lesson in it, and there's always something that's going to help you grow to the next place. It's like the hinds feet on high places. And that was probably one of the best books that we read at that time.
Growing up as Christians.
Yeah, growing up as young Christians. So it talks about David's tribulations and, you know, what he went through. And
about
so,
affliction and sorrow and
affliction and
suffering.
sorrow.
That kind
Yeah,
of
it says hinds feet on high places. I don't know who wrote it, but
I can't
it was one of those that there was like a million copies, but now
I can see the cover.
Yeah.
so can I.
So yeah, but that's pretty much it. And I'm just really glad to have this opportunity to be able to share our stones with you, the monument of our life together. And it's been really an encouraging time being in Tallahassee and finding Crossway and just being able to get to know everybody and to learn and to grow that way. And the church has gone through a lot of different changes and progressions, but so have we. But that's pretty much it. And I just I hope this helps you in some way or encourages you in some way. I would want our lives to be an encouragement and to be something that would be just give you some nuggets. I guess that was it. So I hope you got some nuggets.
Okay.
But that's pretty much
And I
it.
had to bring Penny, so
I know. Tell me who was with us. This is
Penny.
Penny.
And this is Augie.
Augie.
Penelope Pearl Fryman and Ogden Travis Fryman.
I love the full names. If nothing
Thank you
else.
for asking us to do this.
Oh, absolutely. I now have a way to tempt people to come spend time with you. It's because now they have kittens that they can come play with.
That's if they're kitten people.
Yeah, if they are kitten
If
people.
not, they could hang out with Emily on the weekends.
Yeah.
Emily does this whole adoption thing. So she hangs out at Petco and